Hi, everybody. Luis Elizondo here. I wanted to have a quick conversation with you all on two what I think are very important topics. One is the topic of drone activity recently that we've been experiencing here in the United States, particularly over the state of New Jersey. I do think there's a national security issue here. I think it's very important that we have this discussion. And then, secondly, I want to give you a quick update of the congressional hearings that occurred on 13 November. As you recall, during that hearing, they made it very clear, the members of Congress, that they may be submitting additional questions to those of us who were in the hearing. And they did. And so I want to give you a quick update on those and when you can expect a response to those. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about the drone issue. This is a big deal. It's on every major media outlet right now, and for I think for good reason. No one seems to know what's going on. I do think that some people do know what's going on. I also want to make it clear, first of all, many of you know I still hold my security clearance, and I'm not going to violate any terms of my security oath. And so, because of that, I'm going to address some things in hypotheticals. I just want to say for the record, I do not know if this is fact or not, what I'm about to tell you, but it's something to think about. These are alternative ways of looking at this drone issue. Remember, I've always said that when you're talking about the UAP topic, okay, not just drones, we need to think about things asymmetrically. Things aren't always what they appear. And so, as such, I wanted to share a few ideas with you and see what you think. First and foremost, the drones. Let's talk about this issue. We've been seeing a lot of this coverage in the news, on mainstream media. Obviously, there's a concern. It's being seen. Eyewitnesses, both on the civilian side, also federal side, also law enforcement members, have all been not only seeing these things, but they're videoing them on camera. And a lot of people are asking the question, well, are they ours? Right. And then when you ask the Department of Defense, they say, no, it's not ours. And you ask other organizations. So let's talk about a little bit what we do know. And let me caveat this by saying I just came back from the United Kingdom, and this is not a U.S. problem. This is a problem that we're seeing, frankly, around the world, around a lot of our installations, and same with our allied partners. In the UK, you had an issue there kind of recently with the Manchester airport. Turned out it was probably not UAP or drone related. It was probably a Chinese lantern. But there are drone activity right now of unknown sources, unknown origins, over several joint military installations in the United Kingdom, to the point where the locals are getting very concerned, and frankly, so is the British government. And frankly, they should be, because these are bases where traditionally the United States and the UK have worked very closely together and have held some pretty sensitive things in those locations. I'm not sure if I can talk about that, what those sensitive equities are or were. I know a lot of it's out in the open press, but just because of that, it doesn't give me an excuse. I may not be able to talk about it. So let's just say that there are some very sensitive equities at these locations that we would consider being crown jewels for our national security. Also, let's look at this on the backdrop of where we are right now with Russia and China, right? Things are heating up a lot with Russia, unfortunately. And there's been a lot of back and forth. And for those of you who know, who lived through the Cold War, Russia has always been an incredible chess master. If you look at the Cold War as being a chess match between two superpowers, Russia is very, very good. They think very asymmetrically. And so we need to consider that right now. Politics aside, whether you're for or against or anything like that, let's just look at the reality here. The U.S. and Russia right now are not on very friendly terms. And both of us have weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear equities. So let's talk about this topic. What we do know? What we do know is that these things are being seen over New Jersey, but they've also seen over the president, future president's Mar-a-Lago location as well. We've seen them over recently Langley Air Force Base down by the Chesapeake. And let's not forget that several years ago, roughly 5 years ago, we had the same issue in Colorado. And people in Colorado and Nebraska, to include law enforcement and sheriffs, were chasing these drones that seemed to be doing a grid pattern. What about the drones themselves? Well, we know that some of them have been reported to be the size of an SUV, possibly much, much larger. They do tend to have strobing lights, at least some of them. And in some cases, there seems to be a sound, a whirring sound, which is quite typical of a quadcopter, any type of drone that's using a propeller to mechanically provide lift for itself. So those are some of the things we do know. We also know that no one's taking credit for it. No hobbyists, no clubs out there flying these things. And no state government or local government as well. And apparently, neither is DOD. Now, the FBI is investigating this. They have said for the record they've been investigating this now for the last 30 days, the last month. There are people that are getting very concerned about this topic because these things are not only flying over controlled airspace, but they're also flying over civilian and populated areas. So there should be an issue here. What I want to do is talk to you about two other possibilities regarding these drones. And again, let me emphasize here, these are only hypothetical, but I don't think we can discount them. Let's look at the reaction. If we're talking about an SUV-sized drone, okay, these are not hobby drones. Something like that would be enormously expensive. And then you've got a problem with power, right? These drones tend to be electrically powered, meaning there's a battery in there, usually some sort of lithium-ion battery that you can recharge, and you can fly these things around. And if you're lucky, you get 15, 20 minutes as a result. That's not the case here. Some of these drones are being seen for, in some cases, hours at a time. So we're dealing with a drone, if it's a drone, with something that has one heck of a capability that hobbyists probably would never be able to afford. So we're probably talking a state-sponsored capability. Only a big nation that has the ability to put the R&D, research and development money into developing a large type, if you will, SUV-sized drone would have the means to do something like that and then deploy it, right? It's not just building it and flying it, but taking it to the location that you want it to do its job and be able to do it anonymously. Then you have another issue here. So you have the loiter problem where these things are flying for hours, not minutes. You have the size problem. These are huge in some cases. An SUV is a very large, you're talking a very substantial size drone. This is not a quadcopter. This is something different, something bigger, something that potentially a human being could fit into. So it's probably more than just four rotors. And then you have the transmission issue. Most drones use line of sight. Certainly hobby drones and even commercial drones use line of sight, meaning you have to be within line from where you are transmitting your signal to fly this thing to the receiver on board the drone. That's going to take those signals and interpret them and fly the way you want it to fly. Now, there are over-the-horizon capabilities for drones. Certainly, we see them all the time, right, when we're talking military, but not so much civilian. Because if you want to fly a drone remotely and over the horizon, which, by the way, may be plus or minus 9 to 11 miles, you need the ability to repeat, if you will, or what we call a repeater type capability, where you take that signal and you bounce it off of something. So maybe an aircraft that's flying over the horizon that can transmit that signal beyond where you're standing, or potentially something that's space-based, right? Something that talks to a satellite and then beams it down. So the horizon really doesn't mean very much. Those are some of the ways you could do it. But again, that's very, very complex. It's very sophisticated. It takes a lot of money to do that and a lot of planning. And we still don't have any points of origin where these things are coming from, right? Now, we have radar, a very, very capable radar that we use to track aircraft. And there's transponders in those aircraft that, if you will, they squawk their location and their identity. But we're not seeing that with these drones. These drones are flying anonymously and in some cases appear to be communicating with each other or coordinating their movement with each other. So if these are drones, these are certainly something far more sophisticated than what we're used to dealing with, certainly as civilians. So we need to figure that out. So why would we be flying these around, or why would somebody? Well, if it's a foreign adversary, then we've got problems because someone has a capability to fly these things. Maybe they're coming in by a boat or a barge and they're flying them over the horizon to their location. But that means they have capabilities we don't, meaning they have these quadcopters that can loiter and hover for quite an extended period of time and then, by the way, being able to rendezvous back to their home base so they could recharge or have a battery changed, right? All that takes logistics. It takes manpower. It takes money. It takes resources. And we're not seeing that, at least not yet. So probably there's a potential that these are not foreign adversarial drones. If they are drones and they are big and they're large and they're sophisticated, then they're probably our drones. Now, when I say our drones, someone in the U.S. government, DOD has already come out and said, no, they're not ours. That may be true. there's other agencies out there, right? There's DHS, and there's other organizations out there like Department of Energy, believe it or not, who are responsible for protecting some of our nuclear facilities, and they have drones. So one scenario could be, and again, let me just emphasize here, I don't want anybody to freak out, but one scenario here could be that these are our drones being lent by one of our organizations, maybe an intelligence organization, to another domestic organization that's very concerned about our security. Perhaps there is a scenario where there's an adversarial nation, maybe we got a report or suspicion that some adversarial nation has a weapons of mass destruction somewhere here in the continental United States, and so we are deploying these vehicles in attempt to sniff them out, if you will, try to locate these things if it's true. Again, I have no information to indicate that there is indeed some sort of broken arrow situation or where we have some sort of weapons of mass destruction here in the continental United States, but it would explain a lot of the responses we're seeing, right? Where local law enforcement isn't being informed of what's going on, state law enforcement and officials aren't being informed, and yet someone in a federal agency is spending money and time and resources to do this. Now, what scenario would predicate such an act? Well, if there was something so scary, so dangerous, that maybe they don't want to scare the people. Maybe they want to try to do this in a way that doesn't cause mass panic, right, or something to that degree. Again, let me just emphasize, I don't know this to be true. It's just a hypothesis, if you will, of if this was our drones, why would we be keeping it secret from local and state law enforcement and other officials and even Congress? Maybe because we have some sort of threat information and we're trying to find something. Another option is possibly that these things aren't always drones. They could be confused. You could have, in some cases, because some people reported these large triangles, in some cases these drones are flying silently with no sound. And yes, you see a strobing action to some of these, and some of those could be navigational lights of drones and aircraft. But there's other possibilities as well. And so let's talk about those possibilities, for example. It's possible that you could have, for example, a UAP being seen over a sensitive U.S. facility or installation. And so what do? We launch our drones, because typically in the past we used to fly helicopters, but helicopters are expensive. And let's face it, you may have one or two, if you're lucky, if it's available to you. And there's time it takes to get a pilot, wake them out of bed, have them go to the helicopter, start it up and fly it. By then, whatever it is you're chasing is long gone. So it makes sense that you have these quick response, quick reaction drones on or near military installations, that if there was an event, you could launch these immediately. In fact, almost autonomously, and they would all go to a pre-arranged location and start surveying the area to see if they can find what's in and around the area. So is it possible that some people are seeing UAP initially, and then the government's response is to launch these drones to try and find these things in a relatively quick and efficient manner? And so what people are seeing, in some cases, some are seeing the initial UAP, whereas others are now seeing the follow-on response, the U.S. response, and trying to identify these things. Is that a possibility? I think so. That certainly could be a possibility. Drones now and drone technology is becoming far more pervasive. It's very efficient. By the push of a button, in fact, you can have these things automatically respond. If you have something on radar that you don't know what it is and it's in your airspace, you could have it where these things are tipped off automatically, and they just go out and deploy to the area that they've been programmed to conduct reconnaissance and do just that. So that's another possibility. And I just want to make sure that as we have this conversation and we move forward, that it's not necessarily just an either or situation. It might not be. It might be a combination of everything, or it might be neither of those, right? But I think we need to look at this. If you look at why certain elements of the government are being so secretive, look, we have counter-drone capabilities. We have that. So if there's a drone over a sensitive military installation, we already have the capabilities electronically and even physically, kinetically, to neutralize those instantly. And we're doing it in the combat field a lot. Now, there could be another thing here too. Let's face it, the issue in Crimea and in Ukraine is dire. And so you have drones being weaponized and used in a guerrilla warfare type scenario, attacking the Russians. And the Russians are doing the same against the Ukrainians. Is it possible that these huge drones are a show of force, perhaps by a country like, let's say, Russia, that wants to demonstrate that, Ukraine and maybe the U.S. aren't the only ones that know how to play with drones, right? And say, hey, look what we can do, and you can't see us, and you can't catch us, and you have no idea where we're coming from. Is that a possibility? It could be. Certainly could be. Drones have been used to great effect against both sides, and certainly it would be not outside of Russian norms to demonstrate their capabilities to us. So something to consider there. So again, my point to this drone conversation, it is a national security issue, but it's not just New Jersey. We've been seeing these all over the place, to include over in Europe, here in the United States, and it wasn't just recently. Going all the way back to, if you remember, the drone issues that we were encountering about 5 years ago over Colorado and Nebraska. So we certainly need to find out who's behind this, and I do think it's an imperative for all of us. But at the same time, we also have to keep an open mind of what actually could be, because right now we don't have enough data, and if anybody out there does have the data, they're not sharing it. So I think, my personal perspective, if it's one of these scenarios where maybe there is some sort of a WMD somewhere. I'm okay with telling America that. I think it's okay for the general population to know what's actually going on. We can handle ourselves in a way that, we don't necessarily freak out about it. Certainly I'd want to know if that was the case. But again, with that said, I'm not saying that that is what's actually happening. I'm just offering you an alternative position as a what if scenario. Again, so please don't everybody take this to the bank, and I'm not trying to freak anybody out. I just want to have an open and honest conversation with everybody and look at this from other alternative ideas. All of these, if you look at them independently, they all kind of make sense in their own right. There's obviously some challenges to each one of those arguments, so that's why I say, look, it's just hypothetical. But I do think we need to look at this topic a little bit more openly than we have been. It's not just hobbyists and drones and quadcopters, because that's not what we're dealing with most of the time, in my opinion. I think we're dealing with something far more sophisticated, far more capable, and possibly related to a state actor. Just looking for the data that I see. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do, forgive me for bumping the screen there, is talk to you a little bit about the Congressional update. As you know, several of my colleagues of mine, to include Mike Gold from NASA and Admiral Tim Gallaudet, both from the Navy and NOAA, and the reporter Mike Schellenberger, all testified, and myself testified on 13 November before the American people and to Congress. And first and foremost, I applaud the courage of our members of Congress to have this hearing. It was a continuation of one that began about a year and a half ago with my other colleague, Dave Grush, who many of you already know. And I think it's a positive trend. But if you remember, during the hearing, they said that they reserve the right, if you will, to provide additional or ask additional questions via writing after the hearing. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. A couple of days ago, I received an email from the staff of certain members of Congress. I won't say who. That will probably come out anyways officially. And they asked me a lot more questions. And so I am in the process of addressing each and every one of those questions in a very formal manner. I suspect these questions, as I was told, will be included as part of the congressional record, so you all can see them. The reason why I'm not going into detail right now what those questions are is because I want to give Congress a chance to do their job, and I don't want to do anything to prejudice, so to speak, the jury on this. When I say prejudice the jury, what I mean is I don't want to provide questions right now, then all of a sudden Congress gets inundated with a whole bunch of stuff, from the general public. I don't want to distract them from what they're trying to do. But those questions and my responses will be made public, one way or the other. And I think it's a great example of how our members of Congress are taking this topic seriously. They want to give you the information. They're honestly, if you look at these questions, these are really informed questions. These aren't just, hey, general curiosity. When you read these questions that they're providing me, they've done their homework. Like they have really talked to some people, to the point where I actually, on a few of the questions, I got a bit nervous. I'm like, wow, how am I going to answer that? Those answers are due by the 23rd of December. So I will have those submitted to Congress officially. I don't know how long it will take for Congress to release them as part of the record, but when I am notified, you will be first to know. I will let everybody know that Congress is very interested in my responses. I don't know if they have reached out to Admiral Gallaudet or Schellenberger or Gold. I haven't asked them. And I deliberately haven't asked them because I don't want to do anything where anything looks coordinated, right? I don't want my questions necessarily to influence anybody else's. If they were asked questions, I don't want my responses to influence their responses to their specific questions. So I'm purposely not sharing my questions or my responses with anyone until which time they are submitted officially and formally to the members of Congress, to the committees, for their action. So with that said, there may be even more questions that come up. If we're ever asked to testify again, I'm sure my colleagues and myself certainly would be more than happy to do it. I do think it's time that we start considering for some maybe hostile witnesses subpoena power by Congress to go and force people to testify. There's a lot of people out there that say, "Oh, I'll testify for the record," and then when they're asked, they don't. They run away. They don't want to testify. I'm not sure how helpful that is. I prefer a carrot over a stick. If we can entice people to come forward and have that conversation with Congress and the American people in a way that's non-threatening, I much prefer that. But there may come some circumstances where that's not a possibility. We're going to have to potentially subpoena some individuals to testify. Hopefully that's not the case. But anyways, that's the latest and greatest coming into you from my wonderful home here in Wyoming. Going to get a little bit of rest here. A lot of things happening in 2025. Very, very exciting. I think there's going to be a lot more information forthcoming. There's an appetite. I will tell you my focus now, because many of you know if you will, the 5 pillars or 5 areas of emphasis that I've focused on the last 7 years have been legislative engagement, executive engagement, media engagement, international engagement, and public engagement. Well, we've done pretty well, I think, with legislative engagement, and executive engagement's doing pretty well with Arrow and potentially some new opportunities with new organizations to come on board and be part of that conversation. And media engagement seems to be going quite well. There's a lot of media out there that's picking up all these stories on UAP and drones and everything else. And public engagement seems to be pretty good. The one area that I'd like to start focusing on, I think, for 2025 is going to be international engagement. It's important that we bring our friends and allies. Every time I go to the UK or anywhere in Europe, I'm reminded, friends in Germany and Italy, even France, how important this topic is to them, and that they are having some of the same things, same issues that we are having as well. So anyways, with that said, I think you can expect 2025 to be pretty exciting. So with that said, I'm getting a warning on my computer here that my disk space is about full. So I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you very much. God bless each and every one of you, and look forward to more of these. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.